Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I wanted to wait until the beginning of this week to make this video, right? Because I didn't want to really spoil anything for anybody with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's the reason why I made that poll here on my channel, to find out when it is that you guys watch. And by and large, it looks like most of you guys watch it on Friday, it trickles off to Saturday, and then basically drops off on Sunday, right? So by Monday, pretty much everybody has seen the newest episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, right? Or enough people that anybody who complains about spoilers is because they just chose not to watch the show, right? Or whatever reason, right? But the fact remains, I wanted to make a video explaining Isaiah Bradley. But here's the biggest issue that you have with this, right? And not really an issue. There's not a whole lot to explain here, right? I mean, there's nothing that we can't explain in the span of like 5 to 10 minutes. So we're going to kind of beef this up a little bit, right? And we're going to provide a little more meat and potatoes to this discussion and kind of give you this full, well-rounded depiction of how Isaiah Bradley fits into the Super Soldier Serum, the Weapons Plus project, how it all kind of leads to like Wolverine and different things along those lines. So Isaiah Bradley first appeared in Truth, Red, White, and Black #1 in January of 2003, and he was created by Robert Morales and Kyle Baker. Now, the writing for the story is fantastic. The art is kind of wonky. Like, it's a little outside of my wheelhouse, if I'm being honest with you guys. But it doesn't really detract from the story, which is the important thing. Now, the overall gist of this, and this is the segment where I kind of talk about how there's not a ton for us to cover. I mean, I guess there is, and we can cover the actual story if you guys want. Like, if you guys are interested in seeing the actual story, we can make videos on it, right? I'm moving back to Colorado here in the next few weeks. We can just use it as filler content while I'm gone and just throw out the origin of Isaiah Bradley in comic book form. So let me know down in the comments if you guys are interested in that. But either that, or I was thinking about remastering the Legend of Blue Marvel, Adam Brashear, and just kind of doing that, right? Because now that Isaiah Bradley is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I feel like it's only a matter of time before we get Adam Brashear, right? That guy is a powerhouse, man. But nonetheless, so the idea behind this is that Isaiah Bradley was effectively the second person to kind of become Captain America, but not officially. So the idea behind this is that in 1940, Steve Rogers was still alive and well. And in fact, even when Isaiah Bradley was operating as Captain America, Steve Rogers was still alive, right? He was still there, and he wasn't really frozen in ice yet. The whole notion behind this is that, as you guys know, Steve Rogers became Captain America, and then Abraham Erskine died, and the Super Soldier could never truly be duplicated. What you also had was a guy by the name of Dr. Koch, who basically lived in Germany, or operated in Germany, and so the Germans were creating their own version of the Super Soldier formula. That'll become important here in a minute. But the reason why this matters is because in an effort to create more Captain Americas, the US military basically went through and performed a series of experiments. But you couldn't necessarily do that in the public eye. I mean, by that point, you still had the Immigration Act of 1924, also known as the Johnson-Reed Act, which wasn't really eliminated until 1965. And there were things like, just kind of sidetrack from the comics for a second, when you had guys like Laughlin and guys who advocated eugenics, that was actually a thing that happened in the United States. The US was practicing eugenics before the Germans were during World War II. Like, you would literally have people who get off the boats, if they were deemed to be undesirable based on a previously created series of guidelines by the US government, they would be sterilized, right? So like, the United States did a lot of eugenics. Like, they would do it in the Appalachians. Like, they would go to the Appalachian Mountains and they would ask people, like, would you take a shot if it was good for you? And they were like, yeah. So they would like sterilize them because they were deemed to be undesirable. People they didn't really want to have, basically, at least as the US government referred to it, polluting the gene pool. And so because that was the mindset at the time, the other part of that was the birth of the Super Soldier project. Like, we can create more super soldiers outside of Steve Rogers. And so what ended up happening is 300 Black Americans, or really 300 Black soldiers, were basically whisked away to a secret base in Mississippi, and then experiments were performed in trying to create a new super soldier that was essentially just like Captain America. The funny thing about this is that Isaiah is the closest the United States has ever actually gotten, and really even anybody in the world has gotten, to actually recreating Steve Rogers. It cannot be done, right? The perfect super soldier formula that Steve Rogers has cannot be duplicated, right? But you can get insanely close. And basically Isaiah is one of those guys. Now, the whole idea behind this is that the experiments were insanely gruesome, right? So like, they would inject these guys with a serum, and there was one guy about 18 minutes after he got it, his body exploded. But there were only a handful who actually survived. And that Isaiah was one of the guys who survived and then didn't really have any kind of like physical defects in terms terms of how he looked. And so what you ended up having was the US government turning this particular group, which was basically covered in the Black Vine concept, they turned them into a Black Ops team, right? They would literally go through and just perform these missions that like nobody in the US military outside of a handful of highly ranked individuals would really know about. Now, all this came to a head when word had reached the ears of the military that Koch was in Germany trying to create a new super soldier formula, and they had this particular camp where it was being done. And so where the story had kind of unfolded with pretty much everybody inside of Isaiah Bradley's team, except for Isaiah being killed, because of the fact that he had really looked at Captain America and almost idolized him, because at that point in time, the fictional Captain America comics had been produced in Marvel Comics, that this basically led to Isaiah basically idolizing Steve Rogers. And so what he did is he actually stole a Captain America uniform and then took off to Germany to face off against the possible super soldier serum to basically conduct his mission. Ultimately, he was successful, but he was essentially believed to have been killed in action by the military. Now, at that point in time, his wife Faith had believed he'd been killed, right? The way this worked is that when these soldiers were snatched up by the military, that letters were sent out to every single member of their family saying they died in an explosion, right? And that's why the remains can't really be recovered, or that's why the remains are charred, or whatever kind of cover story they wanted to use. And so with Isaiah having been believed to have been dead, that kind of wrapped things up for that story, except for the Captain America aspect of it, right? So the way this played out is you initially had the guy who was kind of running this whole program, and then you had his assistant. His assistant, who was named Private Merritt, was eventually busted on drug charges, but in his property and all the stuff that he owned, his warehouse, was a tattered Captain America uniform, the one that had been used by Isaiah Bradley, and Steve Rogers had been notified about it. And so Steve Rogers basically started tracking down this whole thing, and that's where it all kind of comes to a head, right? That's where you basically learn the whole story of Isaiah Bradley, because Steve Rogers is trying to track him down. And then from there, like, Isaiah doesn't really have, I mean, he's part of the crew in Marvel, but not really in a massive way, right? That focused more on Josiah, and then it focused on Elijah, right? Like basically the son and grandson of Isaiah Bradley, if you can call it that. So the whole idea behind Josiah, the son of Isaiah Bradley, is that he was a guy who was essentially carried by a surrogate mother, right? So the super soldier serum's effect, because it was not really a perfected super soldier serum, the effect it had on Isaiah Bradley is that it basically sterilized him, right? So he couldn't actually have any kids. They had a daughter between him and his wife Faith, and that was it. And so what ended up happening is the US military basically took the eggs of Faith and took basically the sperm of Isaiah, and then used it on a series of different women in order to carry a baby to term. And they went through like 30 different women until finally one was born. And so this kid basically became known as Josiah, right? Now Josiah eventually visited back, went back to go visit his family, and then vanished. But following that, what you go into Elijah. Now Elijah is a far more interesting character. He was part of the Young Avengers. The way this played out is that the actual biological daughter of Faith and Isaiah, a girl by the name of Sarah, she actually ended up getting remarried. She basically had a son, but her son knew the story of the legend of the Black Captain America, in the sense that Isaiah Bradley's reputation began to kind of grow and expand in the Black community, right? So it was like one of these things where the Black community knew and believed that he was actually the Black Captain America, but nobody outside of that really knew it, right? And that was just kind of a way for Marvel to sort of explain his existence without anybody like Wolverine, who's been around for a few hundred years, knowing, not knowing that he doesn't exist, having characters having a character that can kind of tie in strongly to the Black community. So like when he shows up to the wedding of like Storm and Black Panther, then like a lot of the Black superheroes who were there, the prominent ones, know exactly who Isaiah Bradley is, but nobody else does, right? So it was a cool way, it was a really, really cool concept to kind of pull it off that way. But the important thing is that Sarah basically gets remarried. She has the son Elijah. Elijah lies about having the super soldier serum, right? He lies about, having powers and all that kind of stuff in order to get onto the Young Avengers. And so the way this plays out is that eventually he's injured. Captain America goes to give him a blood transfusion, and then it turns out that Isaiah had already done it. And so because of the blood transfusion, the super soldier serum of Isaiah is passed on to Elijah, and that's how Elijah becomes the super soldier. That's most likely what's going to happen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It'll be like the dying action, the dying act of like Isaiah in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is that somehow or another his son will be injured, and then he'll have to give him a blood transfusion, and then probably end up dying in the process or something along those lines. Who knows? I have no idea, but they'll find a way to write him out. But that's basically the meat and potatoes behind the whole notion of Isaiah. Now let's kind of expand this out a little bit, right? Let's expand this out. So in the greater pantheon of the super soldier serum and all that kind of stuff, how does Isaiah fit into all of this? So as most of you guys know, we've talked about this before, right? So if you guys are familiar with this, kind of bear with me while we run over this for the fans people who are new. So the way this works is you have Project Rebirth. This is called Weapon 1. That's the actual name for it, the kind of behind the scenes secret name for it. The reason why it's called Weapon 1 is because it's part of the Weapons Plus program. And the Weapons Plus program was a precursor to Project Wide Awake. The Project Wide Awake was the full-on military and really even governmental action of trying to contain and control the mutant threat. Weapon 1, or Project Rebirth, was the attempt to create a super soldier that could actually carry out that mission, instead of having to rely on conventional weapons and cops and different things along those lines. Again, all that stuff is stuff that we learned in Grant Morrison's New X-Men. For those of you guys who never read Grant Morrison's New X-Men, but would tell me that I was wrong. So the thing about this is that you go forward with essentially Abraham Erskine, the creator of the super soldier serum, dying, and now can't be duplicated. There's no way to recreate the super soldier serum. Now you would probably ask yourself, why don't they just extract a sample of Captain America's blood and then just synthesize it from there? Well, two things. One, because Steve Rogers probably wouldn't let them, and two, it's what makes Captain America unique. Marvel would have no desire to do that, right? I mean, and if that was the case, it would be like giving everybody, you know, Spider-Man's powers, right? Or giving everybody an Iron Man suit, which they've actually done before, or giving everybody the ability to wield Thor's hammer, which they've also done before, or turning everybody into the Incredible Hulk, which they've also done before. Okay, so yeah, you guys are right. It's entirely possible they could do that, and there really isn't any reason to believe that they won't, because they've done stuff like that before. But the important thing here, to kind of get back on track, the important thing here is, with Abraham Erskine having been killed, that if you had Weapon 1, which was Captain America, then you had Weapon 2, which was the attempt by Weapons Plus to create more super soldiers after the perceived death of Captain America when he was basically frozen in ice, then Isaiah Bradley fits somewhere in between 1 and 2. You can call him 1.5 if you want to, but he fits somewhere in between 1 and 2. He's not really a Weapons Plus project. It's really more of just like a private government project where they did it on their own and didn't really have any involvement from Weapons Plus. But that's the whole basis behind this, right? That's the reason why Isaiah is a little unique here, is because he's basically the government's attempt to recreate the super soldier formula, but not necessarily under the purview of Weapons Plus and then eventually Project Wide Awake. Instead, it's just kind of off the books, away from everything else. Let's see if we can make it work, and then if we can, then we'll give it to all the other super soldiers who are out there, right? We'll give it to everybody out there. But ultimately, it all just kind of went belly up. The whole thing, you know, with Isaiah having been believed to have been killed, the project was scratched, you know, and then you just kind of went forward into Weapons Plus and Weapon 2, right? It's really kind of how that unfolds. So with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.